Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deeper dive, a look at the arsenal of the RBD's class. The arsenal, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, isn't exactly that big. As you can see, it's only 7 weapons wide, but what it lacks in quantity, it makes up for more than enough in quality. A lot of these weapons sport some absolutely mean blessings and can demolish even the heftiest of targets. I am going to go through each of these weapons today and talk about which are my favorites and least favorites and which blessings I think you should be using on them. If you're concerned mostly with what builds would you run with certain weapons, don't worry. On the 23rd, on the day that the class goes live and everybody can play it, that is when I'll start releasing build guides for this class, because that is necessarily when you will want build guides, is once you have started actually playing and leveling your character. So that is when you should expect those. If you could, help out the channel by going down and subscribing, especially if you want to see those build guides. Check out when they're showing up. But also, in the description of the video, there's going to be a link, fatshark/Mr. E. That is an affiliate link that will send you to the Steam store page. And if you could, wishlist the Arbites DLC on Steam. You don't have to intend to buy it. You don't even have to own the game or have Steam at all. Maybe you're an Xbox player and you're just watching this on your phone. Go ahead and just wishlist it through that link. And every 50 of you that wishlist it, it will allow Fat Shark to send me a free Arbites DLC key. And I'm going to be giving these away to the community. I'm going to be giving them away in the stream on the 23rd to celebrate the release of the Arbites DLC. I'll be going live at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time, so you can tune in, get a chance at winning a free key, and of course you can get one for my contest as well, so check that out. Alright, that's enough shilling for me. Let's get into talking about these weapons. As I said, there's some absolute bangers in here, but there's also at least one in here that I am not so fond of, and I'm certain that many of you are very interested in what my favorite weapon to play with so far, my least favorite is. My least favorite, I guess I'll get the spoilers out of the way, is the Assault Chainsword. I think this thing has not really come anywhere since since the early days of the game. This weapon still just doesn't feel right, and it certainly doesn't feel right for the class. This thing doesn't have very much stagger potential at all, and it also doesn't capitalize on enemies that count as staggered, which is something very, very important about the class that I guess I should mention now and get it out of the way. A lot of the discussion today is going to be revolving around this passive right here, concussive, the single most powerful talent on the whole tree for the class. So this means that when enemies get hit in the head, they count as staggered for 4 seconds. So even though this enemy isn't staggered, he is now staggered until roughly now. But weapons like the chainsword here don't capitalize on that extra damage. So what you'll see over and over again today when we're talking about these weapons is weapons that can capitalize on the stagger state of enemies are the absolute kings for this class in terms of damage potential. So yes, while this weapon has the chain rev and that can be pretty useful, I don't think that this is at all a viable weapon in terms of like late to end game material. I wonder if potentially this chainsword might be having a revival or a rework coming up kind of soon, because it's pretty much the only weapon on the class that I think is a low power level weapon that hasn't been touched yet. So that's my least favorite. Let's look at my favorite weapon though, which is the Shockmaul, the single-handed Shockmaul. This thing absolutely slaps on this class. This thing has an amazing ability to capitalize, as I said before, capitalize on getting those headshots. So let's demonstrate here. Oh, let's get rid of this guy. All you have to do is hit an enemy in the head one time, and now he is taking 40% increased damage. So you can see he goes from taking a 1,000 hit on the first hit, and then to 1,500 on the second hit. So we are doing some absurd damage to this guy, and this is a weapon that ostensibly only has a 300 damage heavy attack. It is quite absurd. Pair that with the fact that you can also electrocute enemies like this, and then that electrocution holds them still and does several hundred to 1,000 damage after the fact. It is a very, very solid weapon indeed, and it has lightning fast attacks and tons of stagger that come out. This weapon also synergizes amazingly with our dog. who can electrocute enemies as well, and that allows us to finish them off when they're in that staggered state and also when they're electrocuted. So that is my favorite weapon in the class, and let's go ahead and take a look one by one at the rest of the arsenal, and we'll chop through and we'll show how these weapons perform against crushers and other targets. Alright, first up in the arsenal is the RBD Shockmaul. This thing is absolutely brutal. It trades some of the utility and the ability to amplify damage that other weapons such as the Shockmaul and the Crusher have for raw damage. So look at their damage numbers, their raw damage numbers, and then compare that to the RBD Shockmaul. 250 on a light attack, 350 on a heavy attack. That's some serious stuff. This is helped even further by the fact this thing has a 1.7 times critical multiplier, and this class, when you have a talent that's very, very easy to get in the tree, you'll have up to about 20 to 23% crit chance almost constantly. So you'll be critting all the time and blowing away targets with even the light attacks. Like crushers, or sorry, shotgunners and gunners just die to light attacks with this thing, and all horde enemies fall over like they're made of paper. So this thing has great base damage numbers for its light attacks for clearing horde, and then we can scale its damage even further when it comes to all those enemies that aren't getting one shot. And that's what the blessings I have chosen here are focused around, is getting rid of targets that are going to take more than one hit to kill. And that's like our crushers of the world and our bosses. And those are threatening enemies for the RBDs because, you know, we are not an assassin class. We can't just explode crushers like the zealot can with the dueling sword, and we don't have the damage over time capabilities of the Ogren or of the veteran, who can apply bleeds and burns and get these bosses melting down. So we just have to resolve to just beat them over the head over and over and over again. So you see here, if I hit this enemy the first time, he takes 463. But if I just keep hitting him, this damage is going to scale up and up and up and up until I'm dealing about 1,000, and I can deal 1,500 on my heavy attacks now. So that's some serious damage, right? And that is because of these two blessings. The first blessing is high voltage. It allows you to get up to 25% increased damage against electrocuted enemies. How electrocution works is pretty simple. I think I've already discussed it a little bit so far. But yeah, the enemies like this, when you light attack them, they have a chance to be electrocuted. Or if you heavy attack them, they are always electrocuted, that little sparking effect on there. And once they are electrocuted, that second attack that comes in is going to hurt them extra because, you know, that's the whole idea, duh, right? The second talent on here, the second blessing on here is Relentless Strikes. This is the real scaling factor. We can get up to 50% strength, which is both damage and stagger values, if we continually hit the same enemy over and over and over again. So it stacks up to 5 times. It only lasts for a couple of seconds, but that's more than enough when you're just going into a crusher and you're just hitting him like this. So you can start with a couple of like light attacks on him and then follow up with a nice big heavy for like 1,500 damage. But that's not all the tricks you can pull with this. This weapon has a special attack that is actually very potent. And this special attack is this swipe that kind of like bristles with electricity, right? Like that, right? And this actually has a special interaction with electrocuted enemies. So what you want to do is you want to hit an enemy and get them electrocuted and then swipe them with that. And what that will do is put them into this stunned mode where they're going to take electrocution damage over time. You can see that is actually not an insignificant amount of damage. I mean, he takes, I think that was like 750 damage or more, maybe 800 damage like that. And it also allows you to hit lower health enemies and just leave them to die. So you can just do this, and he's dead, right? He doesn't even get to play the game. So just a 1-2 simple combo on enemies like that, and they are absolutely gone. And that is one of the best strengths of this weapon. So this weapon is way up at the top of the chart, one of the best weapons in the class. Let's go on to one of the worst weapons in the class, which is the Assault Chainsword. I think, as I said previously, that this thing is junk right now. It has always been in a kind of a weird state. As I showed at the beginning of the video, it has no real stagger value, and the only thing it brings to the table is the ability to rev the chainsaw and get some damage like that. But it just doesn't synergize in any real way with the class. It can apply bleeds, which is something the class doesn't have access to readily anywhere else, but it doesn't capitalize on the stagger of enemies, and it doesn't have any way to keep you safe while you're doing what you're doing. compared to the amount of damage that the RBD Shockmaul just did with 2 simple swipes that don't lock you into any animations. To get comparable damage, you need to take the chainsword and lock yourself into an animation on enemy, during which time other enemies are going to gather around you and beat you to death. About the only thing you can do with this weapon that is interesting is you can rev it and then use it when you charge into an enemy like that, right? You can prevent the enemy from being able to attack you by charging into them while you're doing it. So that's about the only thing you can really do with the weapon that's like a fancy trick. I just don't think it has what it needs to be competitive with the other weapons on the class right now. And speaking of competitive with the other weapons, we've got the Rashad. I'm focusing on the Rashad for today because I think the Rashad is the best mark pretty clearly for this act. You could use the Antax, which is a very simple light attack spammer, but this thing has the serious damage. That's because of its triple statting for finesse, first target, and penetration. This allows your heavy attacks to the head to do some tremendous numbers. We're going to scale this further with thrust. I don't think that the right blessing here is thunderous. I think this should be shred instead. I think this should be the additional 20% crit, because critting with this weapon does absurd damage. As you can see here, a crit heavy attack does 1.7 times multiplier, so it's very strong, and it doesn't do the craziest into our carapace friend here, but watch what it does to this boss. I mean, these are uncritical strikes, right? This is with no buffs. Let's do some buffs. Oh my god, look at this damage, right? This is an absurd boss killing weapon on this class. So if you're interested in boss killing, bring the Rashad and just chop the boss to pieces just like that. Next up is the Crusher. This is a fan favorite and has been for a while. It is kind of a sleeper OP weapon because it doesn't really have the best stats in the world, right? You look at it and you're like, light attack at 130, heavy attack 370, like it's a two-handed weapon, it should be doing way more. But the power of this weapon lies in its blessings. It has a couple of really good blessings. For one of the blessings, you have to be taking Skull Crusher. Skull Crusher is going to augment your damage by 40% flat because it's a damage increase for the enemies that take it. So this is a huge buff to the damage we're going to do to enemies, including armored ones, including bosses. And remember that with this class, because of the talent concussive, we don't need to stagger these enemies. So I can bonk this guy, and then I can bonk him again, and you see that increase in damage? That was almost double damage because of that talent right there. So that is a huge buff to any weapon that can bring it. And this weapon and the next one we're going to talk about can both bring this, and you should every single time. The other blessing should either be Slaughterer or Thrust. If you prefer to use Thrust and just sneak up on enemies and go bam and like instantly murder them, it's really good for that. But I like Slaughterer because it gives this weapon better horde clear potential, which is something that it kind of lacks. But yeah, it's pretty good at horde clear once you have Slaughter, and Slaughter stacks a pretty good amount of strength and damage as well. You just need to be ready to turn it on those priority targets. This eventually, once you have like a big thick horde and lots of enemies to kill, this thing starts scaling to absurd levels with that additional 40% strength there, and then you just take that 40% strength and you dunk it on the nearest big enemy you can find. And of course, obviously, you have your big wallop. The most important thing to do here would be to drop it into an enemy who's already had their headshot thing activated and give them some serious what for. But this is a really high skill weapon to use properly, and the weapon itself is a very good defensive weapon. You can play very safe using this thing because it has those large sweeping strikes and has high stagger values for enemies. Next up is my favorite weapon right now, which is the single-handed Shockmaul. This little guy, this little unassuming guy from older times, often memed upon, but now it's a terror. It's a terror to crushers, it's a terror to everything. This weapon has two of the most insane blessings that this class could possibly have access to. High Voltage, which allows you to increase your damage versus electrocuted enemies, and Skull Crusher, which makes enemies take additional damage when they're staggered. Now, here's how these work together, because when an enemy is taking extra damage while staggered, all the damage that you deal to them is then multiplied. So these two are multiplicative. We have a talent right here that's going to multiply our damage by 1.25, and then we're going to multiply it again by 1.4. So let's see if I can get this to happen, because it is still a chance for the electrocution to happen. But when he gets electrocuted, there we go. He died too fast. There we go. You see how the next hit, he took 700 on the first hit when it electrocuted him, and the next hit does 1500. That is the power here. And of course this weapon has a really cool ability to electrocute enemies like this, so you can guarantee the next hit is going to be absurd. And one really cool thing you can do is, if you're using the charge, which I think is the most powerful ability for the class, by the way, is this. And shock them while they're on the ground, and then they just take insane damage when they get up, because they are not only staggered, but they are electrocuted. They're taking like triple, double damage from everything. Yeah, this weapon is absolutely insane, and the fact that it can electrocute enemies like that on prompt and give you the setup for that absurd damage is amazing. It's just such a fun weapon, and the third-person animations for this thing are really great. I love watching this guy go psycho mode with this thing and just shock with it. Yeah. And you can channel that through the heavy attack. Yeah, very, very cool weapon to play with, and it's, as I said, my favorite right now. I hope you're looking forward to some builds with it. Let's look at the Shockmaul Suppression Shield, which is another super solid weapon for the class. This weapon trades off some of the damage potential of the other weapons we looked at so far for defenses and utility. So in comparison to the RBD Shockmaul, which has very similar damage numbers, you see that? These damage numbers are very similar, but it has less damage built into its blessings. So you won't be able to kill things as fast, but you are very, very defensive as a trade-off. So this weapon, as you see here, let's go back into first person, allows you to put up the shield, and you can bash with the shield and stagger enemies. It has a bigger than normal stagger cone in front of you when you have that going on. You can also block enemies with it. It's very, very good at blocking enemies. Oh, you see right there, that is actually a talent that is on the tree. I'm trying to get enough charge. There we go. You see that gauge on the shield there? That is our power gauge for our weapon special. And this weapon special on this is very, very good. So we can actually flashbang this guy and stop him from doing anything. And that was what the weapon special for this class does, what this weapon does. It also has access to a talent that I think you should be taking whenever you bring this shield, which allows you to stagger enemies like that when you time block on them, called Lightning Reflexes. It grants you 25% melee strength for 3 seconds and has a cooldown of 3 seconds. And this is very potent because there aren't any other damaging blessings on this shield. The only blessings that give you damage amplification are high voltage for that increased damage against electrocuted enemies, and lightning reflexes for that additional melee strength. Everything else is pure defenses, and there's also a bunch of junk blessings on this shield, such as the ones that give you like extra strength when you have taken like this many stamina versus blocked attacks. Those are all crap, and you should never ever take them. But these two right here are super solid, and the best part is they work in tandem. They work synergistically, so I can block this guy's attack, and he gets electrocuted, and then I can follow up, and he's going to take a bunch extra damage while he's got the electrocution going. So pretty nice stuff. And you also electrocute enemies on the wow, that was a fast attack. You also electrocute enemies with the shield on the heavy swing there. So it's a really nice synergy. And this thing has very high stagger values as well, and very solid base damage. I would say that this weapon is an absolute snowplow at lower difficulties. It's only when you start to get into those higher havocs where enemies start to have just a kind of a beefy amount of health that this thing falls off a little bit and doesn't quite have the damage to compete with some of its rivals. And speaking of damage, man, we got nothing but damage here in the last slot. The tactical axe, saving the best for last in some people's opinions. This thing got recently buffed in the last patch and had a couple of things done to it. The first of which is this mobility stat down here. This used to be a default mobility weapon for no fucking reason at all. One of the like lightest weapons in the game, made you move at a snail's pace. And now we have the it's called Ninja in the game's files, movement speed up to 0.79. So, you know, even with 60 mobility in here, we're moving at a 0.4 increase to sprint speed. That's a lot. That's a 10% movement speed increase. And this thing does absurd with light attacks for criticals. These criticals are doing double damage, and as I said previously, this class, thanks to this talent down here, has up to 16% increased critical chance, and it has a base crit chance of 7.5. That's 23.5% crit. And then we have Shred on here that can give us up to 20% crit. So we're talking about a 45% crit rate. And we have another way to scale this weapon's damage, which is through relentless strikes. Extra strength on the same enemy when you're hitting the same target over and over and over again. So even just like light attacks on this enemy scale up very quickly. And the problem for this weapon has never been its ability to get through enemies, because this is one of the fastest clearing weapons in the game. Like, it can absolutely murder itself through some enemies. The problem has always been these more armored targets, but they have made some changes to the weapon swings in this thing. And now both the diagonal uppercut and the heavy overhead like that are armor penetrating. They do way more damage to armor than they ever did before. They have increased, I think they have like a 40% increased armor pen. Really that heavy head attack there. And it really starts going, yeah, when you start to get those crits in there, when you're up at your 45, 40 whatever percent crit, that is when you start to tear it up with this weapon. And of course this weapon attacks lightning fast, so everything else just falls apart in like a matter of seconds. And let's test it out on a boss as well to show that damage. Alright, so yeah, pretty solid boss damage just using light attacks. We can go into heavy attacks and do some good damage as well. It's not quite Rashad levels, but this weapon is much safer to play with because it is so fast. And remember, it's a mobility weapon now, so you can like move and attack. You can sprint and charge the attacks. Yeah, it's a very, very fast weapon. This is the dueling sword of the class, is what I'll say there. Alright guys, so that is everything that I want to showcase for today for the melee weapons. Let me know in the comments which one of these you are most excited to see builds with. Please don't say the chainsword, okay? Fuck off with that. But everything else here, these weapons are incredible. I can't wait to make builds with them. Honestly, they all feel so good on this class, and they all have their own place in like just absolutely tearing shit up. So look forward to that stuff. I appreciate you so much for watching. Make certain you're clinking that link down there, guys, and wishlisting the game so we can get some free keys to give out. And I'll see you very soon. Mystery out. Bye.